Okay, he did. Nothing's happening yet. Let me see. Okay, now we see the poster.
Good. So go down below it again to where it says presentation.
Click on that.
Yep. Click on that again.
It should take them to the webinar registration
Webinar
link.
registration. First name William. Email. Okay. Join webinar in progress.
There you go. Just if everything is filled in,
Okay.
join webinar in progress.
Launch meeting.
Sure.
Okay, it says it's connecting and that little wheel is going around. There you are. And unmute your speaker. Are you muted?
All right, I just elevated him.
Oh, shoot. We saw your face for a minute.
Well, hold on just a minute. You're going to come back again.
Or increase volume. There he is, yeah. Host would like you to unmute. Hit unmute.
And then if you go to the far right.
Far right.
How do we see the video, Carson?
The video part. And there, honey, this thing was on. That shouldn't have been on. Unable to start video. Okay, but you should get rid of this. Unable to start. Why is it unable to start the video? No open suggest Q&A. I'll just close that.
So try it again.
It's not on. Start.
Try it again. Try it again, Carson says.
There
you go. You're on.
He says we're on. So I'm trying to see.
So we can get off the phone now. We're going to get off the phone. We can get off the phone.
It's hard to hear you. Let's see.
How's that? Is that better now? Can you hear me?
Now, yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'll hang up.
We got it.
Okay.
Well, great.
You're up there, honey.
I see me.
Hey.
Wee. Okay.
We did it. We did it. Okay, now we've got 13 participants who are here. Carson, should we let Bill, you ready? We're going to let our participants in.
Great. So where are we? Am I going to see 15 little squares?
No, you're not, because we're in a webinar, so you're not going to see anybody.
Oh, I
they're
see.
actually, Dan, they're actually in. So we are ready to go.
Okay. So,
All right.
Are you able to make them visible to us or not, Carson?
If you click on the attendees tab, they can. Let's see.
Attendees pad.
I'll do it, Bill. Don't worry. Okay, I'm clicking on that tab, and nothing happens.
So participants, and you click on attendees, and we can see we've got Emmett and Colin and Daniela and Jared and Jeremy and Joshua and Lauren and Trevor and Zach.
Okay, cool. I can't see them. I've clicked on participants.
And so
Yeah.
there's the panelists tab and the attendees tab.
Hold on. I see panelists and attendees, and then I click on attendees, and I can't see it. Bill, can you see everybody or not?
I see you and I see me.
That's it.
That's
So
it.
You're not going to be able to see them unless we make them all panelists.
Oh, so let's make them all panelists now.
Oh, this is all right. Sounds
Sorry.
good.
Sorry, we'll bring them
All
all.
right.
Then Bill can see their faces.
I would love it. Is there any way to make this a little bigger so I could see everybody a little bigger? No, probably not. Full screen thing? No, we can't. Maybe.
That's a good question, but I don't have an answer for you.
I don't want to screw something up by trying something like that.
Exactly. That's
No.
the danger.
No.
Oh, they're not showing their faces though.
Everything looks the same. I see you, Dan. I see me over there. Oh, I see Zachary.
Zachary brushed his hair. Hey, come on, guys.
Oh,
Show
they're
your
coming.
faces.
They're coming. They're coming. They're coming.
There they go.
Oh, look at that.
They're all showing up.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to ask Joan. You watch for this number of people. I have to go do something nobody can do for me. I'll be right
Okay, all right.
back. Yeah. But I got all tied up with this other thing.
Okay, Bill, we'll see you in a few minutes. I'll hold down the fort for you.
Okay.
All right.
But we have Joan.
All right.
Much more charming.
Yeah, we're going to take our next cabaret next week, I told you. And he's going to let me sing the first song I ever heard that he wrote, that he showed me. And he wouldn't let me ever do it. He would always sing it. So yay, a little departure.
Okay, okay. So you've sung a lot with your husband, Bill.
Right?
And you've done mostly cabaret songs, right?
Yeah. You know, when he wrote his fourth symphony, he wrote a part for me because he studied poetry with Theodore Retke at the University of Washington. And he told Retke he didn't want to be a poet, but he wanted to know how to set words. So Retke let him in the class. And he set that poem of his called The Rose, because I grew up in Portland, Oregon, the city of roses, you know. So that was Slatkin conducted. It was a St. Louis Symphony, Bill's fourth symphony. And then the rest of the time we did, popular older pop songs. And then he wrote those cabaret songs for me.
Right. Now, Bill, in his note to me,
Yeah.
I'm going to share with our performers, one of whom is with us today, said, hey, you know, there needs to be a look at some essentially original ways that these pieces were sung. In other words, that one can't just look at the music, but you really need to go to the phonograph recordings that were made to see how Gershwin probably wanted his words articulated.
Exactly, because for theater people, the acting was paramount. You know, you had to deliver, you had to make the words understandable so people would get the joke or feel something for the character. So, singers, sometimes it's about the voice. I was lucky I had a teacher, the only one who ever made me read the translations. She knew I didn't speak German or French, but she made sure I read the translations so I'd know what... I told you all that before, Dan. She was a family... Her husband's brother had a chemical plant in Trieste. He hired James Joyce to teach his children English. So to have a voice teacher... Oh, and she had been a child prodigy... In Vienna, she played for Brahms at 14. Can you believe that? That I could have been in the same room with somebody that, had been there with Brahms. Okay, now Bill just came back, so that's enough of my...
No, it's very... Well, I have to ask you, though, before we start officially, did you know the Eder family in Portland, E-D-E-R?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
We lived in Vancouver, Washington a long time in the Veterans Development. Mommy had to take the bus every day to work. She worked at a department store in Portland, Oregon. Then we moved to Portland my second year in high school. And I went to Holy Child Academy. Is my halo on straight? I graduated and
St. Joan.
The voice teacher helped me get a scholarship to Gonzaga University. And I went there. And I had the guy, my voice teacher had kicked Bing Crosby out of the Glee Club for misbehaving.
I see. You see, I ask you the question because I know when we grew up in Seattle and you in Portland,
yeah,
Portland probably had 50,000 people in it, and Seattle had 100,000. So
yeah.
You could ask somebody and say, hey, do I know you? And they'd say, yeah, I know you because I saw you down at the store the other day.
Oh, for gosh sake. Well, no, we never made it to Seattle that I recollect.
Well, I got down to Portland with great frequency.
Oh gosh, well, I wish I'd have seen you. And
sorry.
Okay, darling. Here comes Bill.
Put Bill back in the chair.
I'm coming. Good. Hello.
Here is Bill. So now we're officially starting. William Bolcom in the flesh, at least as much in the flesh as you get in the virtual world. So, Bill, we've got about an hour. We've got mostly composers here.
Oh my gosh.
We have one or two performers, which is lovely. One you can see in the middle right is Jeremy Hugh Williams, who sang your songs. So Jeremy's been at all the events.
I don't see him.
We don't have him. He's not here.
He's raising his hand. Oh, you may not be able to see him. Can you go to full screen or not, Joan?
I'm hitting the thing. There's, Zachary, Trevor, Mike, Mariano. Jared, honey, there he is. Oh,
hi,
look at that. How do we make it? Let me see. Can I click on? Oh,
hello.
Gosh, bravo.
Oh, nice. Oh, wait, bravo for last night.
Yeah.
I sent off a note to Dan. I don't know whether he actually forwarded everything to all of you, but no, that was a terrific performance of both those cycles. Bravo.
Oh, thank you very much.
Where are you from?
I also performed George, but
Oh, yes, of
Oh,
course. I
somehow
imagine.
disappeared.
So where are you from, my friend? Jeremy, where are you
I'm
from?
from Wales.
oh.
Wales.
I knew it. I knew it. She's Welsh.
I used to sing in Central Park with my harpist, and one day a guy came up to me and he says, "My dear, are you Welsh?" And I said, "Yeah, on my father's side." He says, "I thought so." Isn't that something? I've never been there though. Well, anyway,
Oh, we were very.
I live in Wales.
I
Yes.
think we waved at Tintern Abbey, and that was it.
Tintern Abbey. Yeah. Okay.
That's
Have a
about it.
wonderful meeting.
All right, fine.
Ju-
So
ju-
anyway, bravo again. Thanks so much.
Just so you know, Bill, he came here via Jamaica, where he quarantined for 2 weeks. And then he came to Tucson, where he quarantined for 2 weeks.
Yes.
Okay? So this is a labor and act of love and affection. So
It was the only way that I could be admitted to the United States, by spending 2 weeks in a third country, and then I would be allowed. So I chose Jamaica.
Well, I haven't. There were a lot of things that we were supposed to be doing the next year. Canceled.
Yeah.
The one thing I'm still not sure whether, with the world's going the way it is, that I'll be able to go to Heidelberg in April of 22, because I have a piano concerto being premiered by this brilliant Igor Levin, and it will be with the Mahler Chamber Orchestra. And I mean, it's a wonderful thing. I hope to be able to do there in the flesh, but I may have to do it looking like over the screen or something, with the way things are, because I mean, as an American, I'm right now, we're pariahs, we are so, but of course, so everybody else turns out to be too. It turns out there's big rises everywhere now, so that nobody's really, except we are really the big world champion when it comes to having more cases than anyone else. I'm so embarrassed for our country and our president and our stupid people who are for him.
Yep.
Let's not get into that.
by 2020, things will be in good shape. So Bill, let's ask a simple question. So when you write music, how do you do it? What do you do? Are you sitting at the piano half of the time? Are you going back and forth between your piano and your drafting table?
No. All I do is sit down and write.
Okay.
I hear it all in my head and I just write it down and there it is. I've done that since I was a small boy. And so it was, my whole 12 new etudes were not once verified at the piano. And this is also true with the other ones. But I mean, I don't have to do that. I mean, I hear it and I write it down.
Got it. So you hear it pretty much just inside the brain at all times with great clarity.
I hear it in color. I mean, I hear it. I mean, I hear clarinet when I'm reading for clarinet. I hear voice when I have voice. And I was like, no, I have a fairly good sound system inside there. It's not anything. The rest of the world outside is far less sensitive. I'm very lucky. So what I do is I write down an imperfect rendition of what I hear in my head.
Got it. So we heard many songs.
So I know.
And we heard lots of pieces for piano.
Yeah.
You may hear everything in your head, but tell us about the genesis of what you hear, how you make a decision about how you're going to start going with a piece, and particularly with text. You said something really, really very sweet, I thought, which, by the way, I mentioned, I just talked to some of the kids at Juilliard, and I said, hey, you should come in and hear Bill Bolcom. But Bill said when he writes for voice, you know, that the texts tell him how they should be set. Explain a little bit about that.
When I'm working with a person who is a singer or a player or anything like that, at that point, for that moment, it is a collaboration. What are these funny boop sounds?
I don't know. I'm trying to get Daniel's face back on the screen and I can't.
Honey, don't.
We still have Jeremy. Okay, I'll just leave it
Just leave it
like
alone.
that.
I'm looking at Jeremy, but I think maybe you want to look to. Okay, here.
I tried to open it.
Well, I don't know what else is happening. Well, anyway, so
we don't have your picture, but we have your voice. So
well, all right.
Go ahead and keep talking.
Now, where were you? How do I do it? It's a big mystery to me.
There you go. We've got your back now. You're in good shape.
I opened the video.
Okay.
Good.
It's a mystery. I don't know how and why I could do what I do, but I can, and that's what it was. So I didn't study for it. I somehow was avid about music from the very beginning of my life. I never considered doing anything else. From childhood on, I became a pianist basically out of necessity, and I will play because I have to, but I never wanted to be a career pianist because I have to play all the repertory everybody else is playing, and it didn't make sense to me. Why should I do it? I mean, you have Richard Good. Why should I play Beethoven? He played Beethoven great. They don't need me to do that. So that wasn't the point. I mean, much as I love all that, and I do know the literature very well. As for piano, I mean, I've always been very interested in how it works. Just as I get involved with any kind of literature, I find that when I'm working on, I learned to write for opera by working with opera singers and being in an opera house. I had the great, wonderful fortune of doing 3 operas for Lyric Opera Chicago with this fantastically amazing woman, artist Kranick, who really made a hotbed of real creative energy that we all had the greatest time working with. When I think back to the 20 years I spent with him, I think I was so very, very lucky to have been able to do that. But what excites me is how I can work with a person, and between that person and me, or those people and me, whatever it will turn out to be, I can find some kind of there's a kind of a synergy that happens out of it that gives me the ideas of what I want to do. I mean, I do want to have a sense of the person I'm writing for, because that is part of the mix. And if I can do that, then I feel I can do it in the most effective way. So now that doesn't mean I'm necessarily writing a portrait of the person. It means that I have that other part of the whole thing. Yo-Yo Ma said something once. He said, there's this kind of electrical circle going around between the piece, the performer, and the audience. And the idea is to keep that current going. And you know when the current is going and when the current is stopping. And what you do is you try to deal with it and get on its wavelength. It takes you where it wants you to go, but that's because you're aware of it, and it's your volition, but your volition is not an arbitrary one. And you know very well when you're trying to be arbitrary, and it tells you, don't, no, listen, shut up, and just watch. And it's like the old Chinese thing of when are you the horse and when are you the rider? Sometimes you're the horse, sometimes you're the rider, but you're engaged with that horse, and the horse is engaged with you. And it seems to me that's about as close an analogy that I could find about how how I operate, how I compose. And I listen to what happens nowadays. Since I have to compose on computer, my hands are so arthritic. I'm amazed I can play music at all, but my handwriting is a tragedy. My hands don't go where I want them to. It's one of those ugly things of being 82 and arthritic and neuropathy and all the other things that flesh is there too. But it doesn't really bother me because I can still manage, and that's all that matters.
When you write a piece, do you always write from beginning to end? Is it a flow straight through?
It depends on the piece. Some pieces really, some will go A to Z. Songs of Innocent Experience, I had this little huge box, and I kept adding stuff to it, and finally when the box got to a certain height, it was time for me to start working and putting it all together. So I have lots of little sketches, tiny little jottings. Notebooks are full of it, just a bar or two, and that generally will be a little kind of an entering point. So if I go back to that little part of the thing, I've written down, there's a whole piece behind it. But I don't have to write out the whole thing. Sometimes I write a whole section up. Sometimes I find myself writing a whole section, and this happened to me. I'm in a big fire of excitement, and then going back there and not using a single bar of that. So sometimes it just skates your head, and I say, okay, that's fine. But what I want to do is sort of like it. Conrad Souza showed me a very curious thing. Speaking of how changes could be, he wrote an opera. I forget that opera now, and he was submitting it for this kind of thing. I was with the NEA, and here's Conrad's opera, and the text is the same, but the whole opera that I was listening to, and we were, as people who were, judges for this thing, was entirely different music. He wrote a whole opera with the same thing, with the note values exactly what they were, but the notes were all different. There wasn't a single place where there was a tally between what we were hearing and what was on the score. It's the damnedest thing I've ever seen. So I think that different people work different ways. That's all. But I mean, for my particular case, it's always been sort of I have to engage with it. I do want to have the reality of having somebody in mind when I'm writing. I think maybe I'm going to be doing something for wonderful Houston ROCO Rocco Orchestra with Alicia Lawyer. And she's asked me, well, what do I want to do after all these years of writing? What have I not done? And I finally decided, well, we talked about it for a while, and we had a nice confab last couple of nights. And I think I'm going to try to do a concerto for chamber orchestra as a kind of a, now it sounds like a kind of grand gesture, and I think I can do it. And that's something I think I'd like very much to do. So that's, but I had to be sure that I could be engaging somebody. The other thing about it is I found that if I write something that is pretty closely tailored to somebody, the more tailored and the more focused it is, it's easier for somebody else to come and find a focus. Well, here's my, Hugh Wibbs, and you found entirely different focuses on those things than the original people I had written for. Stephen Salters, you weren't, I don't know how you feel about, but you're not black, so how are you going to feel about it in a certain way? But that was plain. And he asked me to do a group of songs involving the homoeroticism, gay experience. And I said, okay, because I had friends who were gay, so I had writers, so I used them. And but that was his thing. But Cavafy, I picked that, and things like that. But I'm not every point everyone knows is about that. But Stephen had really asked for that, so I did it, and that became part of the mix. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you are or not are gay, that would make any difference. Somebody who wasn't gay could do it the same as somebody who was. But the idea to put yourself into the thing that makes sense for the music and the material involved. And I try to get, once I have a kind of a picture of what the song is going to be, then the rest comes rather quickly.
What about a huge project like your 3 operas? How do you pace yourself, and how do you get into that kind of a project where you're in it for 2 hours, 2.5 hours?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do?
Well, one of the things that has changed my whole life to have started to do those operas while I was also full-time teaching at the University of Michigan, and every weekend Joan and I were off doing concerts. We went at 40 plus years of an average of 40 to 50 concerts a year, and that was among everything else. And my residency at the Lyric Opera, to be able to finish those operas and working with them there, and all the other things involved. So I found myself, the only time I could really write without having to be bothered by people was like early in the morning. And so I cannot break the habit of getting up at 5:30 every morning. And I've done so. That means it also puts me to bed pretty early too, because, well, at 82, so there's a point. We don't watch much television. I haven't gone to a movie forever, and I don't sit down and listen to music. I just get up in the morning, read the paper, and sit down. And then Joan and I are now working on this cabaret we're putting together to be streamed on the 29th of October. And so we'll work on that every day a little bit, and then we'll do a thing about the 24th, I think, something like that. And it's another 10 days. It's not too much, but we have that to do, and then we'll do that because it's a project. But otherwise, I am right now battling with this piece for friends of mine from Rice University, Norm and Jeannie Fisher, who are wonderful cellists and pianist, and this is kind of this will be my second violin, cello and piano piece. The first one was for Yo-Yo Ma and Maniacs. So, but it always gives me some idea of what I'm writing for and whom I'm writing for. I do want to. I know that the concertmaster at the Philadelphia says he always meets you halfway. I always try to do that.
But what about with something like McTeague, where you might not have known who the singers were going to be for the opera, for example? And how did you work on that kind of a piece?
Well, for starts, many times people do. Sure, I had to do, for example, the Minnesota Opera. I had absolutely no input on who got cast, but artists had me come out and see and hear many of the people who were, for example, Ben Eppner. And I remember I had seen him the night before he was playing, and I was at Tannhäuser, and And the next morning he came by, and I listened to artists, and I had just been through before I got here. I mean, I'm talking got up to Chicago to here, Ben, and I had just been involved with a musical theater piece called Casino Paradise, which I had been through in Actors' Equity style, which is to say, yeah, everybody in Actors' Equity, they can actually present themselves for whatever they want to do. And so there are hundreds of people who will present themselves to everything. So now all I got to see was the callbacks. So I had to go to about 10 or 12 callbacks at least for pretty much every part for this new piece I was working on for the lyric opera. I'm sorry, for who was I doing all this for? Gosh, it was eventually first done in Philadelphia at the theater there, but I mean it was eventually also done later at the theater they had built for themselves, at the Prince Theater in Philadelphia. But it was all really much the same. But I had to go to the standard equity thing, and all these different people. I would go from, actually it took several days, and I didn't have to at least go to have all the 100 people who would show up for things. I mean, it really is a cattle call for most of those things in theater. I was used to that. So I got there. Here comes Ben, and he does, well, first of all, he sings something in Russian, and he sings something in English, but and he sings something in Italian. And all was wonderful, and all was very, very clear. I could understand the languages that I know when he sang them, which is nice because that's very rare. And then afterwards, he sings some more. And then, so artists asked me then, well, what do you think of him? He says, well, he's absolutely terrific. The only thing I wonder about all those people in the waiting room, I expected with their accompanist, like I had just been through for 2 weeks. And she said, there isn't anybody else. And you better take him because he's booked up for the next 4 years. So that was that. There was I always was asked by lyric opera through artists, and actually Arnold Weinstein, with whom I worked for those 3 operas. We were always given the chance to audition some people, and we heard them, and but we could also. No, it's not the same thing as many places you go in and you walk in and you don't know anybody. No, they made sure that that we had choices, and so pretty much all the time they gave us a choice. Of course, they were all wonderful, but the fact that we were invited in on the picking of things, I've never dealt with that anywhere else.
And how long does it take you to write an opera?
About a year or some. Each one about something like that.
Something like a year.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Well, they are. McTeague is the only really big grand opera, the 3 I did for lyric. I mean, the other ones are much more Broadway style, particularly View from the Bridge, which was from a very fine, well-known Broadway play, but basically a very operatic one. It's very funny that Arthur showed us in his notebook that when he was writing a View from the Bridge, he wrote down View from the Bridge, an opera. He sort of realized that there was an operatic side to it. Of course, first of all, it's Italians and all the other things that goes with it, but also that kind of raw emotions that you will find in Verdi and Puccini and all, the whole history.
That's Arthur Miller, by the way, just so everybody's clear. Arthur Miller, who wrote.
I loved him. He was a wonderful man. He was a wonderful collaborator. He and Arnold, and we all worked out together. He and Arnold would work out a lot of the libretto before they got to me, but I was always involved with input if necessary. Most of the time, I didn't need to have anything to ask him for. Sometimes I would change a word for something I thought it would sound better, but that was very, very rare. And he was wonderful about that. He also, Arthur, was insisting exactly on there's things that he absolutely insisted on having, but he cut out. Well, for opera, you need to do it. It all takes longer than it would be in a play, so you need to cut out some parts of it. There was a whole family of the Liparis, which are in the View from the Bridge play, not there. And so, in other words, there was a certain amount of paring down, so that will come out to essentially a 2-hour Broadway show length, and that's what I wanted because they were clearly the last 2 were. That and A Wedding were both very much involved with trying to deal with a 2-hour slot of, what would be possibly like a theater situation. Because I was more and more noticing younger singers who were theatrically inclined. And this is something I'm finding more, and it's wonderful. It's something I've always wanted to do in opera because basically I was a theater person for a lot of my early years. I did quite a bit of work in stage music here and in Europe, and also 2 or 3 operas for actors. Actors' operas, which were involved with people whose voices will not be as pretty necessarily, but they all sounded like themselves. They weren't necessarily trying to sound like Carlo Bergonzi or something. This was how I found it was much better for me to deal with people who had some kind of interest in this area. What I loved about Joan is her sense of balance between word and note is one of the best. When I first heard her, I said, now this girl pays attention to the words in the same way as she pays attention to the music, and in equal balance. And they are very much in a kind of way that opera singers will. Maybe 2/3 of the situation will be for the sound of the music, and 1/3 might be for the text, if you happen to be lucky enough to have a teacher who will even pay attention to the damn text. When I did work at vocal rep so many times, I ran into the same old thing. Their teachers didn't even talk about the text. It was all a concatenation of vowels and consonants. So what you're basically having is a phonetic recital when you hear them, and because they don't put the brains in. That was one. Oh, this Greek American, my Lord, she had the most gorgeous voice, and she was really voluptuous. Everybody thought she was a big career. And so I was doing a vocal rep with her on Brahms' Lied, which happened to be one of the ones in which Brahms had actually picked a pretty good poem. Some of the ones he picked could have been in a Hallmark card, but this was a very nice one. I forgot who had been the text. It could have been one of the certified good guys, but it was. And I said, isn't that a wonderful text? And she said, huh? Didn't you pay attention to what it means? She said, no. And don't you think it matters? She said, no, because her teacher didn't think it mattered. It was really a big thing to have things, to begin to see that the theatrical side should be as important as it has become, at least in my cases, or anything like, the New York Festival Song, what Steve Blyer has done as a kind of visionary for the last 30 or so years, has been able to get these singers, many of whom are as theatrically viable as they are operatically viable. I'm thinking of people like Sasha Cook and so many other people who are very strong. Stephanie Blythe. There's so many people that I can think of who have both the credentials as acting people and as singing people. And there's more and more of this kind of thing, which is what I very much prize, because it's right up my alley. And there's more and more people who can do that now. That was not always true. I used to be so disgusted by the fact that the teachers didn't pay attention to the text at all. And it was really true. How about you in your case, Jeremy? Did you have that? Or did you have teachers who, because you obviously do care about the words, and I got them. Bravo.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, I had excellent teachers.
Well, you obviously had to have had, yes. Where did you study? In Wales or where? Where did you study?
The soprano who was George Gett. I gave this class last Monday to the composers, and I said that the text was actually the most important thing, almost more important than the music, because the composer has the text first. The composer has to be influenced by the text before he or she can compose anything. And I've commissioned more than 100 composers since I left Cambridge, $1 million. And the text is paramount to me.
Well, me too. What's interesting, I'm finding that having dealt now with so many people, singers who...
One of the sadnesses, actually, if I would sing your...
Oh, dear.
Oh, shoot, your voice is cutting out.
Oh, Jeremy, we're losing you. So let me go back to Bill. Bill, are you a voracious reader? Are you a voracious reader? So that you always have a backlog?
And I said, of course.
Jeremy, we're losing you.
I don't think I understand.
I'll
Gosh, this is terrible.
I know. I don't know what happened.
There's nothing we can do about it. It just happens with this thing.
Yeah.
It's one of those things.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Can you hear me now?
Well, now, where are you? You're outside somewhere.
I'm outside. You see, because for me, Arizona is so beautiful. I live in a very cold place, so I love being outside. So I'm outside Paula Fan's house. She's
Oh,
practicing inside, my pianist.
oh, I see.
I don't know how much of that you understood.
That I got. That I
Oh,
got. Yeah, all that made there. There weren't any cutouts now, so I'm
Well,
with
but
you.
what you just said, but before.
No, I did not.
oh, well, I mean, one of the things I said was that I was asked to sing in a production of A View from the Bridge
Uh,
in France. And in fact, the production never took place.
oh
But
dear.
I did agree to it. I would have loved to have done that. But I've known your music for such a very long time. So it was a great pleasure to perform it. But yes, the text for me is the most important thing. Of course, the music has to be wonderful. But I've commissioned more than 100 composers. I've raised nearly £1 million for composers since leaving Cambridge. And, you know, it really is my passion. I've recorded some 40 CDs of contemporary music, mostly song, and I continue to record. And I gave this class to the composers last Monday. I don't know whether you heard that. And I told them that the text is more important than the music because the composer is influenced by the text. He has to have chosen the text, or she has to have chosen the text first of all. And without the text, the music is worthless. And you mentioned diction. Diction is not important in itself.
No,
One has to understand that the words.
that's right.
And
That's,
in whichever language the singer is singing, he or she has to understand absolutely everything about the language. And acting is only listening and being able to convey what one is trying to sing about. You know, it isn't a great secret.
I know, but it's so strange to have found everybody was pretty aware of that when I was listening to the recital last night. I gave notes to Dan to pass on to the other singers, but I thought it's also a question of style. The girl who had tried, I thought she did beautifully on my own songs. I forgot her name, Kristen, and it was quite excellent. In fact, both of us were exclaiming how we were very happy with that. But when it got to the Gershwin, there was a problem because I think there was too much operetta in the way it was done. The tempos are too slow, and with musical theater, it has to be, there's a case where the balance has to be just so. It has to be the same weight given to both, or it's wrong. And that's what takes, that's very hard for voice teachers to do, especially if they're dealing with tone all the time and not with, did you find some of your teachers at least paid at least some attention to the text, or did you find there was a problem? I've run into having had to play for so many people as an accompanist over the years when I was going to school and also later trying to make some money. I was flabbergasted at how little attention was paid on any language to what they were saying.
I was so very lucky. My teacher for 29 years was the English soprano April Cantelo, who is 92 now. She was married to Sir Colin Davis.
Oh my heavens!
And she created so many of Benjamin Britten's roles, and Malcolm Williamson and many other composers. And of course, the text was the most important thing for her. And I was a choral scholar at St. John's College in Cambridge, and the very, very famous George Guest. And the text, that's all that mattered to George. Of course, it was a choir that performed professionally 7 times a week, and we toured the world, but it was all about the text.
Yeah. So it is.
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
let's ask. I'm going to ask you another question, a little bit divergent from what you've been discussing with Jeremy, which is, it's a simple one, but it's incredibly hard. And that is, do you have any advice for young composers? You were young once, so was I, and we had to get going and make a living somehow and do stuff. What do you do? What would you say to a young composer who's 21 or 20 or 24 or 28?
Well, I think that's something that has sort of happily changed over the 35 years I taught at the University of Michigan, and that at the beginning, although I have to say that people who, first of all, I was perfectly happy to take a job there. I had a friend, William Albright, who was a good musician and a wonderful composer, organist. Died rather young at 53, I'm sorry to say. But anyway, the fact was that he was not involved with what then, in the 1960s and so on, was a kind of a dictatorship of style, called the imposed total chromatic that everybody had to use all the time, otherwise you weren't played in any concerts, and there was a kind of a cabal among the well, it was a horrible kind of dry academicism, which did actually pervade most of the university composers throughout the United States and to a great extent in Europe. I mean, we had that. My own feeling about why all that happened had something to do with the fact that after the Second World War, people had lost much confidence in themselves because of the horrible things they themselves had done, notwithstanding just. Germany was not the only one who didn't behave terribly well, as we know in the time. So people felt that there was for long years, they were feeling that it was the fault of the Romantic music era, that somehow that Wagner had a lot to do, and Beethoven and all those people were cornering people into a whole kind of a life that maybe brought Hitler into the possibility of. I mean, there was a certain kind of feeling there was a connection between that. So the idea was let's de-racinate ourselves completely, and let's just now go into process. We'll try cereal. We'll try every other kind of darn thing we can to be able to uproot ourselves from the whole world of that kind of signification which had come through the late Romantic period. So this is why it was very much toward the whole idea of serialization and getting free of the history, because the history had obviously brought us through the ugliness of the end of the war and the Grande Guerre Européenne and all that. But with that, so all of that together is why there was this whole terrific cabal here and in Europe toward kind of a certain kind of chromatic that was not historically connected in any way. So the whole idea was to throw away all that. So I think maybe I began to have my own problems with it, and I didn't want to give up tonality as such. I wanted to take how far I could go with tonality, and I still feel that nothing I've written that is really not some way tonal, even though there's some things that are very atonal. A diminished seventh is atonal. It's very easy to be atonal. So it's not a question of that. But the style had to be imposed on you, otherwise nobody would play your music at the concerts, and this was a period like that, and I began to rebel against that more and more. One of the things that really probably liberated me is I fell in love with Scott Joplin and ragtime, and I said, oh yes, of course. And the other thing is I had experience with popular music since I was young, and I played in dance bands, and I loved all that music and so on. And then I began to realize, well, listen, this is the serious prosody. This is how I was said, for example, that the Minnesingers. I mean, Germany had its Minnesingers, master singers, and France had its chanson. It had their whole. What I mean for the French is that, but I mean those were styles that everybody sort of. There was a whole kind of basic style, and the American style, which was still being formed, was formed by our great songwriters. Irving Berlin, who being a second language, his being a second language, it was like Joseph Conrad, that he could be an analytical because he learned it late. And so his whole attitude about how he sets words turned out to be pretty much the pattern that most everybody in that period of Broadway and the kind of highline classic popular song, they all turned to Berlin for guidance. I mean, everyone. So these are people, I used to say, the Germans are oh, sure. The Germans had the master singers, the French had the troubadours, and we had Irving Berlin. So we had this, so our language is still in the process of being formed. And so it was interesting to me to find out. So I decided to look at these people as, well, first of all, I had a wonderful person to do them with them. And that's Joe Morris. We could do it, showing as we performed, this is how the song goes. This is what's in it. But we were always loved by the songwriters because they knew we paid attention to the words and the music and the import. And we got to know some of them and became great friends. So it was, to me, a very important thing to cross over that whole divide and just break down the barrier. Let's find out what we can out of what makes us us. And this is where it was not because I'm after some kind of an American music with a big American music, because there was a whole try of that in the 30s, which was sort of well, now it's sort of out of favor because it seemed very much like exactly what it was trying to do, sound big American. I think we'll have to reassess Aaron Copeland, for example. We were talking about the other day. I think he's kind of terrific, but he wasn't the necessarily pathfinder that people looked at him to be. And all of this is simply a matter of trying to decategorize the whole business of what you're going to do as a composer. The big divide between popular and theater and other music and what we call art music, which is what I do, which is say I write it, but maybe I don't make a lot of money out of it, but that's what I like to do. This is because there is a divide by the fact that the popular music is written, intended to make money. And the theater and the other things, this is absolutely to make money. Well, you could also say that so was Handel, so was all those people back there who were doing these things. But you're talking about a situation in those days where at least you started from the rich and the royalty and so forth. Now you go to a situation where it has to be for the common folk, So they have to be somehow clued into what it is, and you have to take them into account in a way. So, but at the same time, because you are successful insofar as you bring in lots of money, which is the big problem with the mercantile society we're in, which is one of the great problems of trying to fuse the American ethos in your music in a kind of Catholic small C way, which is what I've been trying to do all my life. But it's hard because of that.
Bill, we have a few questions. Let me ask you. So, look, generally your music, whether it's for voice or for piano, is quite virtuosic. The question is, do you come up with ideas first, or do you often, I think you've addressed this, but you often consult with the performer that you're writing for, correct? And listen to their style and their musical lexicon, as it were, to somehow make a conversation often in your music and the performer. Is that true?
Well, I think I want to get a sense of who they are. I'm not necessarily writing, I don't want to get under their skin, so to speak. It's not the question of that. It's a question of getting some idea of what they are because otherwise they would be imprisoned in my notion of them. So it's very important that I deal with what they can do and how it connects with what they are. And this is like, are you writing for oboe or clarinet? This is a singer who has this thing, and this is a singer who has that thing, and that will obviously change how you write. You're not going to write same for oboe or clarinet anymore than you would for a tenor or a baritone or something differently, because all of those things have to do with who they are, what their repertoire is, what they have come from, what their training has been, and or the lack of in the case of popular music. So you have to look at all these things, Many singers in America, I don't know where it's true in Wales, but certainly in Europe it was a case of many people went to conservatories when they were in the teens. And there is, for example, the New England Conservatory in Boston is sort of a little bit close to what you'd find in the European situation, where people actually were doing the solfege at 13 and things like that. Singers in the States pretty much find out they have a voice when they're 17 or 18 or 19 years old, unless they have to be musicians at one point or another. This is all new stuff. Joan suffers from that, but she's one of the many people who are like that. I know so many of the big famous people who are well known in the operatic world, and if they write me something down, it's like a child's hand. They really are, they're not trained in a certain way, and because it came too late. It's like learning a language is harder the older you get, and to have learned the whole rudiments and everything of the musical world is not comfortable for many singers because they got to it late. So you deal with that, and you also realize that you can operate on what they can do and where their strong points are there. So you're always dealing with what I can't say they're defaults, because it's not that. It's a question of what their training is. What does their training enable them to do? That's what you're looking for. You're not looking for what they can't do.
Got it. Now, another question from someone on our faculty, a wonderful choral director who also sang your songs of innocence and says, boy, was that fantastic. Her question is, what specific influence of yours do you see in works of your students and former students, if any? That's an interesting question there. It sort of brings into question the nature of your view of the teacher-student relationship?
Maybe my first thing would be, I'm delighted that's all that's happening, but I never am particularly interested in being an influence from I mean, I don't go around and say, hey, there's a little bit of Bolcom over there. I don't look for that. What I'm looking for is what they can do on their own terms. But I suppose people outside have told me that, or other people, oh, this sounds like a Bolcom student. Why? Because they are freer. Maybe, I don't know what the word, that's at least what I hope has happened. I mean, I just hope they found what they are doing. It's wonderful to see somebody beginning to get their wings and pick up and go. I've seen that with several students. It's wonderful to see. David T. Little is one. And now he's flying on his own kind of way. I'm very proud of these students. Derek Bermel is certainly one of the major singers of this whole
Gabby Frank.
young Gabriella Gleda Frank, who I think is a phenomenon. She's done extremely well. But I'm very proud of all these people. I don't know whether you could discern any Bolcom tricks in their music, but maybe they. All I'm trying to do is for a student I'm working with is to help them find where they are going to be on this road of, where do you, what is going to be your conveyance? Depends on the person. I remember there was one guy who was a saxophone, and he's on the faculty at the University of Michigan, and he came in. He'd been to some place where it was, and there's so many schools like that in those years in the 70s, where you had these people doing tight, very sort of anal, music that was, and so this poor guy said, and he brings me his second, third, fourth week, and he said, should I have an F sharp here or an F natural? I said, and come on, what is this about? First of all, this isn't you. You're a jazzer. Write jazz, for God's sake. And he's done that ever since. And remember, I saw him about a year or two later, and he says, I'm so glad you said it to me, because I was so miserable. And this is, I think, more often I've had to deal with people who had notions that they felt they had to do something. And then what I've tried to do, not necessarily because I'm doing a psychiatrist or something, I'm helping to help ferret out what they're. I've always felt for a student, here's the student. How about this? Do what you can't help doing. Do what you were so drawn to that there's no question of you not doing it. Don't do it because you think, this is something I've got to do because this is what people want now. Because that will be the same old gray, role that people put out in academia and much of the world, totally because it doesn't catch you, because it's not what the person really would like to have done, but they're doing it because they think they have to. So the main thing to do is to find out for yourself, what can I not bear the thought of not doing? What makes me do this? What compels me to do this? What makes my life impossible if I don't do it? And those are the things that will tell you what you are, and eventually, you will find yourself. But I don't tell them how to do it. I say, the idea is, does it, in the end, you have to be a law unto yourself. You've got to find out what the law is. It is a law, but you have to find what that is. And that's a matter of finding out. And you don't have to be, please try not to imprison yourself. One of my colleagues said something, well, I won't mention who it is, but the first a student I had later came in the first day. The professor said, what can we do to help you establish your brand? And that, absolutely, nice enough guy, but I can't forgive him to say that. Because that's what I'm putting him. First of all, you're just learning your damn craft. Don't try to establish your brand before you've gotten enough of an arsenal of musical vocabulary that you can have a good free time writing what you need to write. You need to get your craft. You need to get your chops. You have to have and I think it's very important to know the canon, very important to know all this, the music that has brought us to this strange place we're in. And it's very important to be part of it for yourself. It's also, if you are a good performer, not to give up your instrument or voice. But your main thing as a composer is what you are, but that's going to make a great deal of difference. Not to leave that, not to give up on. I remember when I was at Stanford, my colleagues would say, "You shouldn't be performing. You're a composer. By the way, would you play this piece of mine?" Mm-hmm. See, this is, if you can't help it, Do it.
I'm just going to interpolate one little thing. My theory has always been that the songs I choose, they pick me. Sometimes I would try working on a song and it just wouldn't let me in. It would, no, dear, not you. So I would have to let go of it. And even now, there's some songs they're calling to me in ways they never did. So we're putting together an interesting program it'll be broadcast on October 29th on this site. We'll send you a link.
Good, good. Bill, I have a question for you. So you've had a long career, you've had a long time in music. How much have your opinions changed from when you were a younger guy?
We haven't time to talk about that. It is, well, what can I say? I would have to give you my own kind of history. I was very lucky in that somehow we were able to get connected to the music school at the University of Washington in those years, the 1950s. It was a very good place to be. It was open. Many schools have gone through kind of digestive problems later, and that's one of them unfortunately right now. But at the point I was there, I had excellent training. I was also spending, in a given week of when I was in junior high school, which is 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, no, 7th, 8th, 9th, those years, I was aged 11 when I was going down one day a week on Thursdays to the University of Washington, where I would have my piano lesson, I would have my composition lesson, and I would go to some classes. And I would take the bus down to Seattle from where we were living, 30 miles away, and come back. And I did that every Thursday through that whole school time there. So I came in with a very strong training. I had all my... when I went to work with Darius Milhaud, when I was first with him in 1957, he was remarking how much of a technique I had, because I had these wonderful teachers and I did everything they had to do, and I had my counterpoint and harmony and orchestration. By the time I got to work with him at Mills, and then eventually later at the conservatory, in other words, I had my chops, and I had them early. And that may be a little bit closer to maybe some of the people who were in Europe, for example, Britain would be like that, for example. But I was lucky enough that I had it early. I also, as a performer, gave piano lessons, and I had piano recitals here and there. And there might be some standard. But also, I premiered my first set of piano etudes in 1966. And the second one I did at, what was the year? 80 something, I forgot. And, but I mean, I did play. And I would maybe give a piano recital, and I loved doing chamber music, which was much more for me. I'd rather play in a Haydn trio than play a Haydn sonata, but I love the Haydn sonatas. But I mean, I don't want to play the standard repertoire. I don't need to play Rachmaninoff, please. Deliver me wonderful songs, wonderful vespers, and all. But I don't want to play those concertos, and those are the things you have to do if the sponsor asks you. And I don't want to be in that world. Never did.
Bill, it's almost 6 o'clock, and I've just been informed
One
by
more.
Carson, who's been our host for this, that he has a recording of George that Jeremy created but didn't make it onto the program. And if you're willing, I would like to close this out with Jeremy's performance of George.
Oh, I love it. I'm sure I will love it a great deal, and Joan will too.
Yes, I love it.
No, we're all. My Lord, how did you do that? Now you're outside.
You said that this was based on your experience with numerous transvestites in New York. Are we talking about Charles Ludlam and the crowd?
Oh, I was very close to those people. They were good friends of mine from way back. I was, my first wife and I took a place on Cornelius Street in Greenwich Village. And it's the same place, by the way, those of you who live in the States and have a Kroger's, and they have a Murray's Cheese store. The original one was on my little street there, and I was there. My wife was a pianist, and so I was teaching at Queens College and going in from that place on Cornelia. But then I needed to work someplace else because she was playing all the day. I can't say their practicing was very efficient. But all day there's a piano. I couldn't work with that. So I went around I was told I had to find some kind of a studio I could work. And he said, well, look down the street. Here I am on Christopher Street. And look for somebody covered with paint. It was somebody who had just painted an apartment, on the in New York, there may be about 6 inches of paint on every piece of wood, over the years. Anyway, so I found this guy on the street, all covered with paint. And I was on Christopher Street, and I asked him what is it? Oh yeah, it's be a 46. I thought he said 146, and that was more like a 46,000. Okay, so he took me up to the floor there, and here was this very wiry guy in a pinstripe suit, and I made the deal right there, $46.90. This is 1966. My 5th floor walk-up. I eventually found an ad, and I got myself some guy had come to New York and had to sell his terrible piano. So I had this terrible piano. Faye knew a guy, which he'd been with Music and Art, who was also a weightlifter, but also moved pianos. He put it on his back and walked up without stopping, 5 flights to get to the studio of mine. And I had to go and fit the roof's leak, and I had to go upstairs on the roof, and I was constantly trying to keep it from, and I had these pans all over the place, and it was just kind of weird and strange. But I got there because I had to have some place to work, not listening to Faye play all the same over and over again and never getting it right.
Gotcha. So everybody who doesn't know Charles Ludlam.
Oh, that's how I got to know all these people, because I went to, I loved it.
Charles Ludlam. But right now, Carson is going to play George for us, which, if you don't have your program notes in front of you, is a composite of a number of figures.
Oh, I think of one of the guys who named Albert, who used to sing the Bell song in a mink coat, all in falsetto,
In a mink coat. Here we go. So Carson, if you're ready, we'll take George anytime you want.
Oh my!
Okay, I'm working on sharing screen right now.
He's working on sharing the screen. Did everybody hear that? So hold on just a minute. If we can share the screen, you're going to get to hear George.
Share screen.
No, you don't have to do it. It will happen automatically. If it's going to happen, it will happen automatically. So hold on. How cool is this?
Wow.
Okay, here it comes. I hope. We'll see.
My friend George used to say, "Oh, call me George, get yourself a drink," and sang the best soprano in a part of town. In beads, brocade, and pins, he sang if you happened in. Through the door he never locked, and said, "Get yourself a drink," and sang out loud till tears fell in the cognac and the chocolate and gin, and on the beads, brocade, and pins. When strangers happened through his open door, George said, "Stay, but you gotta keep quiet while I sing," and then a minute after, and call me Georgia. One fine day, a stranger in a suit of navy blue took George's life with a knife George had placed beside an apple pie he'd baked, and stabbed him in the middle of Un bel di vedremo, as he sang for this particular stranger who was in the United States Navy. The funeral was at the cocktail hour. We knew George would like it like that. Tears fell on the beads, brocade, and pins. In the coffin, and 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 the coff which was white, because George was a virgin. Oh, call him Georgia Han. Get yourself a drink. You can call me Georgia Han. Get yourself a drink.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, yes.
Bravo.
What you may want to true, what Joan does, and some people do all the the great poses in that interim and the end there. You can just go ahead and do all the things. When you're doing all the really strange, all the used to be the whole Del Sarti mope. All those.
I have a book with those
all those
pictures,
things,
so I would do all those things. Ethel Eichelberger was one of his players. Charles loved them, and he did my makeup once for a Tully Hall concert. He was the first person that ever called me diva.
Oh yeah, and you're walking on the street, and there's diva. He chased her down the street. It was wonderful. No, it was a wonderful. I loved my neighborhood. It was all these guys who were rebels and had left home and paid by their folks not to come home because they're gay, and you could see. But I felt absolutely totally comfortable with all of them all.
Oh yeah, Ethel was actually Amish background.
Oh no, Mennonite.
Mennonite. Yeah, at his service, they stood up.
God, they all look exactly like him. It's the most.
I know.
I've never seen a family that looked also much. It's also true with. Andrew DeShields.
Oh yeah,
his family all look exactly like him.
It reminds me. Okay, one joke. You know what an Amish woman's dream is? To Mennonite. Very silly.
Anyway, no, beautiful.
Yeah.
So somebody has asked for a line or two of lime jello.
Ladies, the minutes will soon be read today. The garden club and weaving class, I'm sure, have much to say. But next week is our culture night, our biggest, best event, and I've just made a dish for it. You'll all find heaven sent. It's my lime jello marshmallow cottage cheese surprise with slices of pimento. You won't believe your eyes. All topped with a pineapple ring and a dash of mayonnaise. My vanilla wafers round the edge will win your highest praise.
But I think one thing we have in common with the British Isles and us is that style of food.
Oh, Lord.
Okay, guys, listen. It's a bit after 6, and I'm afraid to tell you, but the fun needs to stop now because I'm sure most people.
It's been delightful.
Thank you, Dan.
Well, thank you for being with us this entire weekend. Thank you for your music. Thank you for all of our attendees. And this has been a joy of a festival, even if it's virtual.
Oh, see, and your performers, thank every one of them.
Absolutely, first rate.
They all gave us of themselves. Bravi.
I will do that, I promise. Carson, thanks for hosting everything.
Bravo all the way across. We
Have a good evening. Have a good evening.
You too.
And you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.
Okay, let's see.
Just
now we
hit
do.
leave.
Yep. Where's the, oh gosh, where's